So Conor McGregor, I got to tell you, I used to make a lot of money with Conor McGregor. Now, if it's not me talking about his dick, I got to tell you, I mean, it bombs. It literally bombs. And that's a massive sign across the board. I am easily the biggest YouTube channel in MMA. And before you try to correct me and tell me, Rogan, I get it, but I'm not discussing politics and moon landing. I am laser focused on MMA. And there is nobody that touches me in this space. We're all not only audited, we're publicly audited. And I am king. Now, I tell you that because if you're bombing, if you start bombing with me, if I used to be able to expect certain numbers and I'm now down here, you're down across the board. And Conor's a tough one. Conor's a tough one because there is topics and issues, and Conor is a very big star. But Conor in MMA doesn't sell anymore. Conor in any illusion of an opponent or of an upcoming date not only doesn't sell, it goes the other way. Whoa. People do not want to click on that. And I have my guesses as to why that is, but I think it goes very in line. I had the same experience with Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones. I used to be able to click and draw and bring in sponsors, and you, the audience, just quit caring. And my hypothesis as to why you quit caring is because you didn't believe that you could get it. Why waste the energy? Why waste the emotion? Why waste the time on something that simply isn't real? And I believe that that's the same reason that Conor and his dick draws more than Conor versus an opponent. That's what I believe. But there was some Conor news, and I've decided that I am going to cover it because I don't think it can be true. I know all the things that we have been told can't be true because the story doesn't work. Allow me to take you to December of last year. I'm a whole year off, aren't I? It was 2 Decembers ago. I'm a whole year off. I was about to tell you a story about UFC 300 that took place in April. That was April of last year. All right, fair enough. It changes the date, but the story remains, and USADA still had governing authority. So UFC 300 needed a main event, and this is where the world was in a really strange place. Like you were getting meaningful writers that were talking about, well, maybe Ronda's going to come back. You had me believing that possibly St. Pierre was going to come back, to the point that I reached out to St. Pierre because there was this big news and nobody knew what it was. Could Lesnar be stepping in? We knew 300 and the main event was going to be massive, but the players had already come off the board. And if you guys will remember, 300 is going to be the biggest event of all time. But 299 was so awesome. It's like, hey, that's going to be really hard to do. And again, we got so many people that are booked. So this is just what allowed for this guessing game, to allow the Rondas and the St. Pierres and the Lesnars to even seep into a possible reality. But one person that was available and was not booked was Conor McGregor. And USADA, who was about to lose their deal, which largely represents all of their funding, largely, it was a very big piece, the UFC, had spite towards the UFC. And USADA, who was going to lose governing authority, wanted the world to know that per their interpretation, Conor, when he returns, must sit for 180 days. What they wanted to do was to disqualify any chance that Conor could fight at 300. It was just a mean-spirited, by my interpretation, it was just a mean-spirited thing to do. And that's how the UFC took it. And the UFC also took the time to respond to it. And it creates for a fun conversation, at least in my opinion. I like the rules. I like the administrative. I like that stuff. And The reason it was interesting, I don't believe USADA's right. I do not believe USADA's interpretation of their own rule demands for McGregor to sit for 180 days upon his return. But it could. Like, no one knows. They have their opinion. I'm just sharing with you. That's not my opinion. And if we take it to the level where we get it in front of an arbitrator or a judge, it's then and only then that we would actually know. And the UFC came out with a statement, and it was much shorter than what I just said, but very in line with that. And they said, we're not going to argue this point. Even if we could argue it, or even if it benefited us, we're not going to argue. We're going with somebody else. We're not working with these guys anymore. But we are, though we don't admit we have to, going to follow that guideline. We're going to follow the 180 days of McGregor in the pool. We are not going to book him at 300. Just so we don't have this voice from USADA and it can't live on and we can be done with these guys once and for all. Now, I'm reminding you of this because Conor McGregor, seemingly yesterday, was drug tested on his yacht, and he stated that it was for his first time in 10 months. And that's interesting to me. Why? Like, there's parts of the story that I have a really hard time with. USADA getting to Conor's yacht, I have a really hard time with. Now, there are dorks that park a yacht and then they like walk on it and then they walk off. Like, there's nerds that do that have a boat, but they don't use it like a boat, and they like turn the music on, and they get beers. They'll even bring people down and have a party. I don't understand it. If I get invited to somebody's yacht and it doesn't leave dock, I'm going to feel like, why'd you invite me to the yacht? I could have just met you at your house. But I'm just sharing with you, that part of the story, for me, I'm curious. How did USADA get to him if he was on the yacht? All right, great. Carpets are getting cleaned. He's down there at the yacht. They find him. They walk on board. They test him. I'm forced to accept this. First time in 10 months. Now, the way the testing pool works is not the way that it's explained to you guys, including by USADA, who was held to a very high standard. But honesty was not something USADA was going to get plagued with. I will give them credit for a high level of integrity, but not honesty. Well, what's the difference? Well, the difference is USADA doesn't want to smarten you up. They're not going to come out and tell you all of the rules and all of the policies. And if they come out and say, this is one of our policies, it might not be, but for good reason, which is they're not trying to smarten up a cheater. And while it is supposed to be at random and you were all told it's at random, there's a little bit more to it. If you were not booked and or having a fight and your name came up, it might get pushed aside and we'll let another come up. Meanwhile, if you are booked and your name comes up and we come to test you, automatically your opponent's name just came up. I'm just sharing with you. Like, there's a few moving parts here. Why did the new agency go in and test Conor McGregor? Why? He's not licensed anywhere in the world. Are you aware of that? Now, I don't need the new testers to come in and explain to me that it's not about license, it's about pool status and not in pool status. But believe me, I do understand that. But it's still relevant. He's not licensed anywhere. According to him, he hasn't gotten a phone call returned in 15 months, which means there's no interest in licensing him anywhere. And if you're not licensed anywhere, and the company doesn't call you back, they owe you 3 fights a year contractually, and they have not called you in 15 months, which means they're 4 contractual rounds behind, and they're still not calling you. By default, that would mean you're retired. But you can't test a retired fighter. And they tested McGregor. Do you see where all of these things can't be true at once. And there's not an analysis or a conclusion by me. There's just an observation. And I wanted to share it with you.